Good morning. Barry Bryson here, thanking you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. And we are in Mark chapter 5 today. We're continuing our study of the life and letters of the Apostle Peter. Peter really is not an active character in today's account. But before we get to John 6, which we'll do tomorrow, before we get that first confession that Peter makes in the ministry of Jesus, I wanted us to see some things that he saw immediately before that. This account involves Peter, James, and John being there when the other apostles, the other 9, are not joining Jesus. Why did Jesus choose Peter, James, and John? I don't know that we can answer that. James is going to be the first to die of the apostles as a Christian martyr. Peter is going to emerge as the early leader in the church, and of course John will live the longest. John will live till the end of the century and probably be the last person of that first generation of disciples still alive when he passes. Why not Andrew? I mean, we know more about Andrew than we know about James. And the things we know about Andrew are wonderful. Andrew has an unblemished record in the Gospels. We can't say that about Peter. I always felt badly for Andrew. I'm sure I would feel more so about him were I a little brother, not a big brother. But I am a big brother, and so my sympathy for little brothers is limited. But I've always felt bad for Andrew for being left out. But he seems to show no hard feelings over that. In Mark chapters 4 and 5, Jesus has finished up teaching a lot of parables. We have the parable sermon in Mark chapter 4, and then at the end of Mark chapter 4 and into chapter 5, we have this series of miracles that Mark records. Let me just say, with our first foray into Mark, and we'll talk about this towards the end of our study, Peter is the most likely source for the Gospel of Mark. So let's think about that too. When we talk about episodes in the Gospel of Mark, we may be seeing Peter's own account of these events. But we have this series of miracles in which we have something frightening happening, and then we have the calm that Jesus brings about when he faces down that fearful thing. But the word fear is not used of the scary thing, it's used of the calm. We have the stilling of the storm, but it's only when they see the calm that they're filled with great fear. There's the casting out of the demons from Legion, which is also frightening, but it's only when people see him sitting in his sane, in his sound mind and dressed and fine, that they feel a great deal of fear. There's the woman with the hemorrhaging, who makes her way through this crowd, and that frightening thing that she had to do to get relief. But it's only after Jesus has healed her that she comes in fear and trembling. And then we have the story of the raising of Jairus' daughter. And this is what I want to see, because it's going to factor in to some things later on that we're going to talk about in the life of Peter. So, Jairus is a synagogue official in Capernaum. Capernaum is the second most important religious site in Palestine, following, of course, the temple. It's not even in the temple's league, but it's an enormous synagogue. It's very important. It's the headquarters for Judaism in the northern part of Palestine, and the foundation stones of the synagogue are still there. You can go see them. One of the few places that you can be that you actually know Jesus was there. So anyway, this is important. And the fact that someone from the Jewish establishment would seek help from Jesus is problematic for everybody involved. But this guy is desperate. His daughter is very sick and near death. In fact, before Jesus gets there to the house, servants come and say, "Your daughter's dead, leave this guy alone." It's very callous, it's awful. But Jesus looks at him and says, "Don't be afraid, only believe." And when Jesus gets to the house, the mourners are there, the professional mourners. When Jesus says she's only sleeping, they laugh, which tells you about how sincere their mourning for this little girl was. Jesus puts them all out, goes into the room with just Peter, James, and John, and Jairus and his wife. And he takes her by the hand, and he says to her, little girl, I say to you, get up. And we have the very words he says in Mark's gospel. He says, Talitha cum, little girl, get up. Talitha cum. Anytime we have the very Aramaic words that Jesus spoke out of his own mouth, we have to stop and pay attention. Talitha cum. And she immediately got up. Now we know from Mark's gospel that she wasn't a little girl, she was 12. She was a year or so away from getting engaged and 2 or 3 years away from getting married. But Peter was there. He was there for all of this. He saw the storm stilled on the Sea of Galilee, which he had so much respect for. He was there when Legion ran at them, this man who could break the chains the people bound him in. He was there when Jesus, in the middle of this crowd pressing on him, said, who touched me? No, 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 somebody touched me. He was there to see this little girl raised from the dead, something that had not happened since the time of Elisha. And he was there to see it. And he would see it at least 2 more times that we know about in the Gospels. When we read tomorrow his confession of faith in John chapter 6, we understand that he's not making this lightly. This is a man transformed by his relationship with Jesus. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word, and we'll pick up tomorrow in John chapter 6.